For some strange reason, the main character, Lest Albion, has been reborn inside the game he used to play over and over again. In this world, Lest is known as a corrupt noble, and his fate is sealed. He's supposed to die halfway through the story. At first, Lest lived a pretty normal life in this new world, with no memory of his past. But that changed when he turned 14, during a sacred ritual called the Divine Oracle Ceremony. It's a tradition where teens are given a skill by the goddess. That's when Lest's old memories came flooding back. The goddess gave him a skill called Tame, a power people look down on, since it can only control weak creatures like pigeons or horses. When his father found out, he was furious. The Albion family has a proud legacy of raising legendary warriors, so his father had hoped Lest would get something powerful, like Sword Saint or another strong combat skill. Instead, with Lest receiving what's seen as a useless ability, his father quickly cast him aside, saying he wasn't fit to carry the Albion name. Even Lest's older brother joined in, mocking him and calling him worthless for the skill he got. With both of Lest's older brothers competing to become the next heir, they were actually pleased. Having a weak younger sibling made their rivalry much easier. Seeing how coldly Lest's family reacted to the news, the priest tried to comfort him, encouraging Lest not to let it weigh him down. The priest believed there had to be a deeper meaning behind the goddess giving him that skill. In that moment, Lest suddenly remembered he was now living inside Symphonia of Sword and Sorcery, the game he used to play non-stop in his past life. What shocked him most was that he hadn't been reborn as the main hero, but instead as the story's villain. That meant, if things went the same way as the game, he would be killed midway through the plot by one of the Demon King's army commanders. Being a dedicated player who had explored every ending, Lest knew that no matter what path he followed, his death was guaranteed. After the Divine Oracle ceremony ended, Lest started analyzing the game's events, starting with his so-called useless skill, Tame. In the game, Tame was known for handling animals like cows or birds, so most saw it as weak. But Lest remembered the hidden truth: it wasn't just for livestock. The skill could also be used to control monsters. In the original game, Lest didn't figure out who he truly was until it was already too late. Years of being mistreated had already darkened his heart, and he ended up using Tame to harm others. His growing power drew the attention of the Demon King's army, and eventually, they stole his ability and killed him. Knowing all this now, Lest realizes that even if he tries his best to change his fate, as long as he holds on to that skill, the Demon King's forces will eventually come for him. That thought leaves him wondering how he can avoid that doomed ending. Using everything he knows from the game, Lest decides to grow stronger and take control of the kingdom on his own. Since the main story won't begin for another year, he plans to use that time to prepare for the worst. But first, he has to survive the cruel environment at home. One evening during dinner, his twin brothers, Edward and Sidward, proudly showed off in front of their father, Marquis Gad Albion, clearly trying to win his approval. Their mother, watching the two boys with pride, couldn't hide her joy, but when her eyes landed on Lest, she coldly called him a failure because of what she saw as a worthless skill. His brothers jumped in right after, mocking him by saying that if he'd been born into a livestock keeper's family, then his skill might have actually been useful. Lest, who was quietly keeping to himself, finally tried to speak up. But his father quickly cut him off, making it clear he didn't care what Lest had to say. Feeling cornered by his own family's harsh words, Lest stood up and left the table, choosing to go for a walk instead. It had been a full week since his old memories came back, and he was slowly starting to connect the dots. Sadly, he couldn't check his stats like players could in the game. But the more he adjusted to this world, the more he noticed that the rules were still pretty similar, like how defeating monsters helped players grow stronger. Realizing this, Lest knew that to level up, he had to train and take down as many monsters as possible. In the game, there was a condition: he could only tame monsters that he personally defeated. So, if he wanted to control powerful ones, he'd first have to raise his own stats high enough to beat them. One reliable method to do that came from the game itself, a daily routine known as midnight training, or as most players called it, the midnight grind. In the game, players could pick from 5 different training types each day, each one boosting a certain stat. But here in the real world, Lest isn't limited to midnight or just one training session. As long as he does every kind daily, he's sure he can grow stronger at an incredible speed. But building up his body isn't enough. He also plans to improve his magic. Using the memories of the Lest who lived in this world until now, he was able to complete his first magic refinement without trouble. His physical strength was already better than average too, proving how hard the original Lest must have been pushing himself. That surprised him, since in the game, Lest always seemed like a lazy character. Maybe getting stuck with the tame skill filled him with frustration and drove him to change. After wrapping up his usual training, Les started heading back to the mansion to rest. But on his way home, he bumped into his 2 older brothers, who were heading off for sword practice. Like always, they mocked him and made him feel like he didn't belong. Edward, who had the great sword wielder's skill, and Sidward, with his swordsman's skill, both clearly thought they were far above their younger brother and didn't hide it. While the twins were talking, a girl suddenly appeared, leaving the maids, Les, and even the brothers stunned. Out of nowhere, she had dragged a massive earth dragon into the field and casually told the twins that she had taken it down herself on her way there. Her name was Elna Lebrisel, and she was the personal trainer of Les's brothers. Even though she was just 18, she already held the title of S-rank adventurer and was known across the land as a genius with the sword. But strangely, Les didn't remember her from the game at all. He only knew about her through the memories of the Les who had grown up in this world. While S-rank adventurers weren't rare in the game, seeing one in real life felt intense and hard to believe. Watching Elna in action, Les felt a wave of envy and disappointment, wishing he could be trained by someone like her too. 2 hours later, in the Albion family's massive training hall, Elna was putting the twins through a brutal session. Les quietly hid and watched, eager to see more of her skill. Just like he thought, she was insanely strong. What shocked him most was how easily she handled both brothers, even though they had powerful sword-based skills. She treated them like little kids, and in the end, they gave up from sheer exhaustion. Watching all of this, Les knew that while training could raise his stats, it wouldn't teach him real combat techniques. And since Elna only came to the Albion estate once a month for sword training, he couldn't afford to waste the opportunity. He had to ask her to train him too. But before he could even approach her, Elna had already noticed him. Without him realizing, she moved behind him like a shadow. Surprised, Les quickly introduced himself, and Elna immediately recognized who he was. After witnessing how she pushed his brothers so hard, Les, though a bit nervous, gathered the courage to say he wanted to become strong too and asked her to teach him how to wield a sword. Still, he felt the need to explain that Tame wasn't really meant for fighting, which was probably why he hadn't been picked for her training. Elna agreed, saying that without a sword-type skill, there was no way he could survive her intense routine anyway. But Les didn't back down. The determination in his eyes made it clear he truly wanted to grow. Seeing that, Elna had no choice but to give him a chance. In the blink of an eye, she tossed him a wooden sword ready to test what he could do. Elna wanted to see if Les was even worth her time, and to prove himself, he had to fight using his own strength. Her movements were quick like lightning, and every blow she delivered was heavy, showing just how far above him she really was. Even though it was clear she was holding back, Les knew that if he let his guard down even for a second, he'd be knocked out cold. No matter how hard he tried, Elna's power was simply beyond anything he could match. They had been fighting for over 10 minutes, and Les's legs were barely keeping him upright. Seeing how drained he was, Elna finally decided to end the match. Right away, Les asked her for feedback. Elna didn't hold back. She told him he still had a long way to go. His body just barely met the minimum standards, and when it came to sword fighting, he was basically starting from scratch. Still, she was curious, what was driving him to chase such strength? Was it to become a great swordsman, to surpass his brothers, or something else entirely? With firm resolve, Les answered with no hesitation he wanted to fight and defeat fate itself. Elna was taken aback. She'd never seen that kind of determination in any of her students before. So, she agreed to give Les 30 minutes of training each time she visited. Once she was finished with the other two, she'd spend that time coaching him as well. But she warned him clearly, if she ever caught him slacking off, not even a little, she'd stop right then and there. Les quickly promised her that would never happen. Since Elna wouldn't return for at least a month, he knew he'd have to keep training hard on his own to get stronger before their next session. Fast forward 2 months, and it's now Les's 3rd day of training with Elna. At first, she assumed he hadn't made much progress. His movements still looked too easy to read. But then, to her surprise, Les showed her a technique she'd never seen from any of her other students. In the game, techniques were just as important as skills, maybe even more so. They were like final attacks that helped push past human limits. Over the last 2 months, Les had managed to learn one of them. It was a single strike move that boosted his sword's speed and strength, and he named it Blade Surge Full Drive, Flash Step. For the first time in her teaching life, Elna felt someone come close, truly close to landing a hit on her. Even though Les's attack was fast, Elna was still much stronger. She blocked it with ease. Les looked frustrated, feeling like all his hard work over the past few months wasn't enough. But while he was doubting himself, Elna stood there in silent shock, amazed by how far he'd come. The fact that he had only been learning swordsmanship for 2 months and was already matching the level of his brothers who had been training for 6 is nothing short of incredible. It was clear that Lest had pushed himself to the limit, pouring everything into his training. But even that alone couldn't fully explain this progress. On top of that, the flash step technique he used earlier was something designed for people with actual sword-type skills. For someone without a combat class, even with natural talent, it should have taken a full year to learn. And yet, Lest had mastered it in just 2 months. That made Elna wonder if she had stumbled across something special, maybe even a once-in-a-generation talent. Meanwhile, Lest, still a little down because he hadn't landed a single hit on her, also felt thankful. Thanks to Elna, he had come a long way. So far, everything had been going better than he expected. Lest believed that as long as he stayed away from the main character and others who'd become his enemies, he could escape his doomed fate. But one night, their father, the Marquis, gave him unexpected news Charlotte, the second princess, was coming to visit their estate. Lest quickly tried to recall who she was. Then it hit him Charlotte was the main heroine in the game. She was the second princess of the Finale Kingdom, and a walking death flag for Lest. If he had to sum her up in one phrase, it would be, the perfect princess. Like many young royals, she had a deep curiosity about the world and easily made friends with anyone. She had a kind heart and treated everyone with respect, no matter their status. Even with all her talent, she stayed humble and trained hard to defend her people. But it was exactly because of her strong sense of justice that she couldn't overlook the things Lest did in the original story. When Lest lost control of his power and hurt others, Charlotte joined the hero to stop him. That battle led to Lest's death cut down by a high-ranking Demon Lord commander. According to the game's original story, there shouldn't have been any interaction between Lest and Charlotte at this stage. So, he couldn't help but wonder why had the plot suddenly changed. As it turns out, Elna also served as the sword instructor for the royal family, and she happened to mention a talented young swordsman from the Albion household to her highness. Curious and impressed, Charlotte decided to meet this person herself. Believing it must be one of the twins, the Marquis and his wife were thrilled, thinking their sons had caught the princess's eye. But what they didn't realize was that Charlotte was actually interested in Lest. Realizing his actions may have shifted the game's storyline, Lest quickly tried to figure out a way to correct it. 2 weeks later, the day of Charlotte's official visit finally came. Lest and his brothers waited together to greet her. But the twins, full of confidence, told Lest to stay out of their way, certain the princess had come to see them. Lest didn't argue, he simply stepped aside and left. While his brothers tried to impress Charlotte, Lest decided to make use of the free time by heading out to hunt monsters. The Arst Forest, a wild monster zone, stretched across Albion land and was perfect for training. The Albion family has strict rules. No one is allowed to enter the Arst Forest until they're officially enrolled in the Royal Academy. Not wanting to draw too much attention just yet, Lest decided to hold off on his plan for now. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the princess had finally arrived, and the twins, along with the Marquis, were having a tea party with her. The twins were captivated not only by Charlotte's beauty, but also by her special skill, Holy Sword Princess. It was a top-tier ability that gave powerful boosts to both holy magic and sword skills, stronger even than their older brother's sword technique at the academy. When Charlotte asked if she could watch them spar, the twins eagerly agreed. But to their surprise, Charlotte didn't seem all that impressed. Their techniques weren't bad, but they weren't anything special to her. Realizing this, the twins quickly panicked and tried to come up with a way to win back her interest. Without thinking about the risks, they made a reckless decision they would show her real combat by fighting monsters in the Arst Forest. Hearing this, Charlotte was visibly shocked. From what she had seen, their skills didn't seem strong enough for a dangerous place like that. Still full of overconfidence, the boys quickly reassured the princess that they could handle it. Charlotte hesitated, unsure whether she should allow them to go. But with the twins sounding so certain, she felt she had no choice but to follow along and see for herself. A short while later, the twins, Princess Charlotte, and her personal aide stepped into the forest. Fear showed clearly in Charlotte's eyes, and she even began to sweat slightly. Even though it was still daytime, the forest was dim and eerie, but despite the atmosphere, the boys smiled and told her not to worry, they had everything under control. While they explored, Charlotte suddenly remembered that the twins had another sibling who was in the same school year as her. Curious, she asked where Lest was. The brothers exchanged a quick look and gave her an awkward smile. Then they lied, telling her that Lest had gone off on his own somewhere. They figured Charlotte wouldn't be interested in meeting someone with a skill as weak as Tame. But just as they were talking, a Grey Wolf, an E-rank monster, leapt out from the shadows and launched a surprise attack on the group. Luckily, the twins were quick to react and took down the threat without much trouble. But even with that small victory, it was becoming clear to Princess Charlotte that the twins' skills weren't as impressive as she'd expected. At the same time, Estella, Charlotte's personal assistant, sensed something off. Her expression changed, and she quietly suggested that they should leave the forest right away. Puzzled, Charlotte asked why. Estella explained that she felt something dangerous was closing in and didn't think it was safe to stay any longer. Still desperate to prove themselves, the twins insisted they remain. That's when a stronger threat suddenly appeared: a Gale Wolf, ranked C, much more dangerous than the one before. The monster lunged forward with incredible speed, and Estella quickly stepped in, blocking the first blow to protect the group. Without hesitation, she told the twins to take Charlotte and run, which they did. But as they tried to escape, another wolf appeared out of nowhere and blocked their path, trapping them. With no other choice, Charlotte was forced to use her magic, while the twins struggled just to land a single hit. Even with her powerful spells, the Gale Wolf's sheer strength began to overwhelm her, slowly wearing her down and putting her in serious danger. Just as the beast was about to deliver a deadly strike, help arrived. Lest jumped in, blocking the monster's attack completely and saving the princess's life. A few minutes earlier, Lest had spotted Princess Charlotte and her maid Estella heading into the Arst forest with his brothers. Without wasting a second, he rushed after them, fully aware of how dangerous the forbidden forest could be. Realizing that his brothers were likely doing all this to impress the princess, Lest didn't even pause. He sprinted as fast as he could, determined to reach them in time. As the group made their way through the forest, Lest stayed hidden, watching them from the shadows, moving silently between trees. Most monsters here were low-ranked, and the twins could handle those. But if they happened to run into something powerful and Charlotte ended up hurt, or worse, her death could mean execution for the entire Albion family. So just to be sure, Lest chose to follow them no matter what. And his instincts were right. In the present moment, he stepped forward just in time to protect Charlotte from being struck down. It was a dangerously close call. Even Lest nearly got killed, but he felt relieved. If he had been just a second later, the princess could have been seriously hurt. When Lest suddenly appeared, Charlotte was surprised to see an unfamiliar face and quickly asked who he was. That's when Lest realized he hadn't introduced himself to her yet, even though he'd hoped to avoid this meeting for as long as possible. But thanks to his reckless brothers, he was now stuck in the middle of it. Even so, Lest still wanted to keep his identity a secret for now. So instead of saying his name, he simply replied that he was just a regular passerby. Charlotte, however, didn't buy it. There was no way a normal person would be wandering around such a dangerous place. She clearly had a lot more questions, but Lest cut her off, saying they could talk later. He still had a beast to deal with. Charlotte understood and gave him space to fight. The Gale Wolf Lest now faced was a C-rank monster that could control wind magic, making it especially hard to deal with. Even with all his training, Lest knew that if he fought it head-on, he probably only had a 40 to 50% chance of winning. Still, he chose to stay hopeful, believing that with the knowledge he had from the game, he might just be able to pull off a win. As the monster lunged forward, Lest managed to dodge just in time, instantly placing himself in front of the princess to shield her from harm. But the fight wasn't going in his favor. He was clearly struggling. The Gale Wolf's attacks came in a variety of forms, leaving almost no opening to strike back. Whether it attacked from a distance or up close, Lest had a hard time finding the right moment to counter. This wasn't surprising. After all, Gale Wolves were known for their perfect balance of offense and defense, making them a nightmare to deal with. But what would overwhelm a normal person in this world was a different story for Lest. Thanks to his deep knowledge as a hardcore player of the game, he had already memorized this monster's patterns. Using that advantage, he managed to land a solid hit, something that left Charlotte watching in shock. She couldn't help but wonder just who this mysterious fighter really was. Although the Gale Wolf's strength and sword technique weren't far off from her own, Lest kept striking it again and again with ease, even more than she ever could. As she watched him fight, her mind went back to the countless hours she spent training with Elna. Ever since she earned the title of Holy Sword Princess, Charlotte had pushed herself harder than anyone. She always knew there were people out there who surpassed her in magic or swordsmanship, but seeing it in front of her eyes made it real. Even with her title as the Holy Sword Princess, Charlotte never wanted to grow complacent. She trained relentlessly, determined not to fall behind those with greater skills or talent. Seeing her dedication always brought a smile to Elna's face. But as her mentor, Elna also reminded Charlotte that not every rival comes with flashy skills or high-ranking titles. Some, she said, were different. That's when she brought up Lest. Elna spoke of a boy, someone not gifted with powerful skills, yet driven enough to rise on pure talent and hard work alone. A boy whose strength, she claimed, could rival even Charlotte's. She explained that he was part of the Albion family and the same age as the princess. Charlotte hadn't planned to visit the Albion estate, but hearing Elna speak so highly of this boy stirred something in her. It wasn't just curiosity, it was admiration, and maybe a spark of challenge too. So when Elna encouraged her to meet him, Charlotte agreed. And now, back in the present, watching this mysterious boy go head-to-head with a powerful monster, it all clicked. His movements, his power, his grit, Charlotte knew instantly. This had to be the boy Elna spoke of. This was less the so-called useless skill holder everyone looked down on, and yet, he was anything but useless. Even though his skill is just tame, Lest shows a kind of strength that breaks all expectations. It's hard to believe, but Charlotte now knows for sure this is the boy Elna spoke so highly of. While Charlotte stands there amazed by his abilities, Lest remains focused on ending the battle, especially now that the monster has run out of magic. He knows this is his best shot to finish things. So when the beast suddenly shifts its attention and lunges at Charlotte, Lest reacts instantly, striking its head with full force and killing it using his signature move One Flash. A fight like this would have been intense for most people, but Lest handled it so effortlessly that even Charlotte, one of the most powerful fighters in the kingdom, was left stunned. But instead of celebrating, Lest stays serious. He knows that for someone with a skill like his, the real challenge starts after the battle is over. Now that the Gale Wolf is down, Charlotte walks over to thank him for saving her. Lest is caught off guard when she says his name. He never expected the princess to know who he was. And when he asks how she knows, Charlotte avoids giving a direct answer. Instead of answering directly, Charlotte points out that she's holding the same kind of wooden sword as Lest, the one Elna personally gave to each of her students. To properly introduce herself, she formally reveals that she's the princess of the Finale Kingdom and shares that she, too, is being trained under the same swordmaster. Despite her royal status, Charlotte doesn't hesitate to bow before Lest, sincerely thanking him for standing his ground and protecting her until the very end. She even admits that his courage and skill with a sword deeply impressed her, though Lest tries to downplay the situation, treating it like it was nothing special. The princess keeps expressing her heartfelt thanks. Her warm, beaming smile catches him off guard and leaves him slightly flustered. Not wanting her to notice his reddening face, Lest quickly excuses himself, saying he needs to check on the Gale Wolf. Before leaving, he asks Charlotte if she can keep an eye on his brothers for the time being, and she agrees without hesitation. Now that she's momentarily out of the picture, Lest walks up to the massive creature. It's easily 20 times his size. Since everything has gone according to plan so far, all that remains is to find out whether this beast is willing to become his companion. As Lest glanced at his status panel, he was taken aback to see that the Gale Wolf had not only acknowledged his strength, but had also expressed a willingness to serve him. So when the system prompted him to confirm the taming, Lest didn't hesitate. He instantly hit yes. Thrilled by the fact that this was the first monster he'd ever tamed, Lest gently ran his hand through its fur, feeling a strange connection form between them. Moments later, the system confirmed. The taming was successful, and a portion of the beast's power had now been transferred to him. That meant Lest had just gained access to wind magic. As if that wasn't enough, he also unlocked a new reward: interdimensional sanctuary granted only upon a tamer's first successful bond. With mana now coursing through his body, Lest could feel his strength rising, and the excitement building inside him was hard to contain. In that moment, he finally understood why the Lest from the original game believed he could reach the pinnacle of power. The skill tame didn't just allow him to control monsters, it let him absorb their strengths. Not only would he gain their heightened physical abilities, but if a creature had a unique skill, he'd be able to use it as well. In this case, that meant Lest now wielded the wind magic of the very monster he had just defeated. In the original game, Lest let his power consume him and ended up meeting a tragic downfall. He lost everything. But now, he's not that same person. Determined to change his fate, Lest pushed himself through harsh training, asked Elna for guidance, and steadily sharpened his swordsmanship. He didn't do all that just to throw it away. That's why he set his sights on taming even more monsters. The more creatures he tames, the more powerful he becomes. And if he keeps going like this, Lest is confident he can someday become the strongest in the world. With the Gale Wolf now officially under his control, Lest decided it was only right to give it a name. Wanting to keep it simple, he settled on Gale as the creature's nickname. Since it's definitely not normal to have such a powerful beast as a pet, Lest thought it would be best to keep Gale's existence a secret. So, to try out his new ability, he used interdimensional sanctuary to hide Gale safely away for now. Not long after, Estella came rushing onto the scene, clearly worried about the princess's safety. Charlotte, who had returned to the twins' side, greeted her with a smile and casually mentioned that another Gale Wolf had appeared, but they managed to drive it off. Estella was stunned. She quickly asked if Charlotte had fought the beast herself or if the twins had protected her. With pride, Charlotte replied that it was Lest who came to her rescue, leaving Estella completely speechless. Stella found it hard to believe what she had just heard. After all, Lest was known for having a skill that most considered useless. But Charlotte firmly told her that she saw everything with her own eyes, there was no mistake. With the secret already out, Lest admitted that it really was him. He explained that the fight had been tough, but in the end, he managed to drive the monster away. Hearing this, Stella was deeply grateful and said she'd like to thank him properly once things had calmed down. This moment made Lest realize he had to be more cautious when interacting with characters from the game world. One wrong step could cause serious trouble. But for now, he simply guided the two girls and brought his brothers out of the forest before anything else could go wrong. When they returned to the mansion, they were met with worried faces. Nearly every maid in the household looked alarmed, wondering where the boys and the princess had disappeared to from the training grounds. Before giving them an explanation, Lest quickly told everyone to tend to the princess's injuries first. At once, the staff rushed off to bring medicine, towels, and water to help care for her. Meanwhile, when the Marquis noticed that Lest was the only one who came back without a scratch, he immediately began accusing him, demanding to know if he had something to do with the other's condition. But before Lest could respond, the princess stepped in and defended him, firmly telling the Marquis that Lest didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he was the one who saved her life. This left the Marquis stunned. He had never imagined that his least favored child would be capable of such a feat. To help clear things up, Stella stepped forward and explained the full story. She told the Marquis that she and the princess had been led into the Arst forest by the twins, who confidently claimed they visited the area regularly. However, things took a dangerous turn when they encountered not one, but two C-rank Gale Wolves. Hearing this, the Marquis was completely shocked. That his beloved sons would lead the princess into such danger was hard for him to believe. Stella, maintaining a serious tone, asked if the Marquis had actually given his children permission to enter such a perilous place. The Marquis quickly denied it, insisting he would never allow something like that. He added that his sons must have entered the forest without his knowledge. If this was true, and the princess had been put in danger, Stella firmly pointed out that the responsibility fell on the Marquis as the head of the house. This made him instantly nervous, fearing punishment from the king for his son's reckless actions. But to avoid further trouble, Charlotte stepped in and chose not to make things more complicated. She also acknowledged that they were partly at fault for trusting the twins so easily and didn't intend to blame the Marquis alone. More importantly, since Lest single-handedly drove off the Gale Wolf and saved her life, she was willing to let the matter go. Hearing the full story, the Marquis found it hard to believe Lest could defeat such a creature alone. Frustrated and confused, he turned to his son, who avoided his gaze. After everything that happened, Charlotte asked the Marquis to show them to their rooms so they could finally rest. Before leaving, she spoke to Lest once more, saying she wanted to thank him properly another time. As the princess retired to her room, the Marquis was left alone, still struggling to grasp how his worthless son could have possibly defeated a Gale Wolf. It seemed far too unbelievable. Meanwhile, Charlotte and her companion stayed the night at the mansion. That same night, Lest, unable to sleep, found himself replaying the day's events over and over in his head. Eventually, he decided to go outside for some late-night training. But on his way out, he unexpectedly ran into Charlotte, who looked stunning in a white nightgown. Seeing Lest made Charlotte light up with joy, and now that they were finally alone, she took the chance to speak with him. Once again, she sincerely thanked him, admitting that had he not rushed over, she likely would have lost her life. Lest gently told her to raise her head, saying it wasn't right for a princess to bow to someone like him. He simply expressed his relief that she was safe, a gesture that left Charlotte deeply moved. She then shared how impressed she was that he managed to fend off the Gale Wolf alone. His swordsmanship had left a lasting impression, and Charlotte concluded that Lest's incredible strength came not from his skill, but from who he truly was. The two began trading compliments, and before long, both of them were blushing from the unexpected praise. But behind the playful tone, Charlotte opened up to Lest, admitting that the whole experience had shown her she still had much to learn. Having made up her mind, she suddenly asked Lest something. Her cheeks reddened, and the way she smiled made Lest's heart race. Then, she asked him to be her sword friend. Lest looked confused, so Charlotte explained she wanted someone who shared her passion for swordsmanship and had the same goals. Still unsure how to respond, Lest gave a slightly awkward reaction. To make it even more surprising, Charlotte added that she hoped to make him her rival, someone she could compete with to grow stronger together. But her cheerful tone faded for a moment as she admitted something deeper. Her training had felt stuck for a while. Up until now, her only goal was to catch up to Lady Elna. But Elna was too far ahead, always out of reach. No matter how hard Charlotte tried, she couldn't even see her back. But Lest, who was the same age and always just one step ahead, felt within reach. With him, she saw a real chance to push herself and grow stronger side by side. Charlotte felt sure that with Lest by her side, she'd definitely grow stronger. That's why, with him as her partner, she believed she could keep improving. Meanwhile, Lest found himself caught in doubt, unsure if he should accept her request. Ever since he remembered his past life, he had promised himself not to get too involved with the game's main characters. But no matter what he did, fate kept pushing him toward them. Eventually, he gave in, especially since Charlotte was so persistent. And honestly, could he really say no to a princess? Once he finally agreed, Charlotte lit up with joy, clearly happy to become friends with him. Surprisingly, Lest also felt a bit excited about it, even though it wasn't something he ever thought would happen. Since they were now sword partners, Charlotte suddenly had a wild idea. She asked Lest to call her by her nickname, Chero. This left Lest totally stunned. To him, it felt way too casual, especially with how different their social ranks were. Charlotte didn't hesitate to scold Lest, firmly saying that she doesn't care what others think. If she says something is fine, then that's all that matters. Thinking back, Lest realized that Charlotte had always been this stubborn in the game. Once she made a decision, she never backed down. So with no room to argue, Lest gave in and agreed to speak more casually, just as she wanted. And just like that, the very person Lest had tried to avoid all this time had now become someone close. Still, he couldn't help but wonder, will this new connection help him, or just bring more problems his way? The next morning, it was finally time for Charlotte to return to the palace. Before leaving, she made sure to personally say goodbye to everyone in the mansion. As the carriage rolled off toward the royal capital, the Marquis couldn't help but feel irritated that of all people, it was Lest who caught the princess's attention. Making things worse, he lashed out at his twin sons for nearly dragging the Albion family into trouble. However, their mother quickly stepped in, reminding the Marquis that while their actions had put Charlotte at risk, they were only following his orders to win the princess's favor. But the Marquis just couldn't wrap his head around it or accept it. And to make things worse, because of his twin sons, the princess had taken interest in their so-called useless son, Lest. Hearing all this made Lest feel uneasy and annoyed. He never thought his family would make such a fuss about something like this. At the same time, the twins began defending themselves. They told their father that the only reason Her Highness showed interest in Lest was because she had been misled. They refused to believe Lest had taken down a Gale Wolf alone. But since the princess clearly said she saw it with her own eyes, the Marquis had no choice but to hold back his doubts. Still wanting to shift the spotlight, the twins then claimed that they had already injured the Gale Wolf before losing consciousness, trying to make it look like Lest just finished it off. They also accused him of using the confusion to trick the princess, calling it an unforgivable act. And since the Marquis still didn't want to accept the truth, he forced himself to believe their claim, even though it made no real sense, leaving Lest staring at them in silence, full of anger and disappointment. In the back of Lest's mind, he knew Edward and the others had attacked the Gale Wolf, but their strikes had no real weight and didn't deal any damage. Lest was certain that it was his own efforts that led to the wolf's defeat, and this time, he wasn't going to let his brothers steal the credit. Still, the Marquis wouldn't even give him a chance to speak and just told him to stop talking nonsense. But Lest wasn't about to let his family trample over him again. His determination to prove the truth shocked his father, who had never seen him so serious before. So, to test if Lest really was strong enough to take down the Gale Wolf, the Marquis ordered him to face both Edward and Sidward at once and beat them to prove his claim. Since neither of the twins had managed to defeat the wolf before, it only made sense that if Lest was telling the truth, beating both should be easy. Upon hearing this, the twins grew excited. They were confident they could crush their brother quickly. And while a 2-on-1 fight went against proper rules, the twins claimed even the goddess would approve if it meant exposing their foolish brother's lies. At this point, if Edward and Sidward are free to use their full strength, then they're strong enough to not be easily beaten by a Gale Wolf. On their own, they're almost just as skilled as Lest. But if he had to face them both together, he knew he wouldn't be able to win. That might have been true yesterday. But now that he's managed to tame the Gale Wolf and unlock this new power, things are different. With this in mind, Lest feels certain he can beat his brothers easily.